Protestants depend on Catholic tradition. Succession versus sola scriptura. The Protestant claim that apostolic succession is unnecessary for Christian authority is both logically and historically specious. The early Christian Church clearly considered apostolic succession essential to establish orthodoxy and combat heresy. Irenaeus, Tertullian, and other second-century church fathers argued that apostolic succession, the passing of authority from the apostles to their successors, was the guarantor of truth. Groups that lacked this succession, like the Gnostics, could not be trusted. Irenaeus, in particular, pointed to the succession of bishops in prominent sees like Rome and Alexandria as evidence for orthodoxy. These fathers saw apostolic succession as the mechanism by which the apostles' teachings were faithfully passed down. In contrast, Protestants argue that Scripture alone should be the final authority, not apostolic succession or tradition. They see the Bible, not succession, as the mechanism by which Christian truth is conveyed. But this view lacks historical warrant. The early church did not have a defined biblical canon, so they relied on apostolic succession to separate truth from heresy. The Protestant view also faces logical problems. The Bible did not descend from heaven complete and self-interpreting. Its canon was defined and preserved by the same church that Protestants reject. And without a mechanism like apostolic succession to interpret Scripture, its meaning becomes subject to private interpretation and distortion. In sum, the Protestant claim that apostolic succession is dispensable cannot be sustained historically or logically. For the early church, apostolic succession was the guarantor of truth and bulwark against heresy. The final canon of the New Testament was not definitively established until the Council of Trent in the 16th century, an ecumenical council of the Roman Catholic Church, held in 3 sessions between 1545 and 1563 in Trento in Italy. Prompted by the opposition of the Reformation, the council clarified and redefined the Church's doctrine, abolished many ecclesiastical abuses, and strengthened the authority of the papacy. Prior to this, the early Church had spent centuries debating which books should be included in the canon. John Calvin had privately decided, based on what he called secret testimony of the Spirit, aka the voices in his head, what books belonged and what should be removed from the Bible. Martin Luther's canon had 75 books, including the Apocrypha in his Bible. Key figures like Athanasius, Jerome, and Augustine disagreed on certain books like Hebrews, James, Jude, and Revelation. The fact that the biblical canon was unsettled for so long further undermines the Protestant argument that Scripture alone is sufficient as an authority. How can Scripture alone be authoritative if Christians disagreed on what actually constituted Scripture? The Church relied on both Scripture and apostolic tradition to determine truth, not Scripture alone. Apostolic tradition is grounded in the succession of bishops, each ordained and taught by their predecessors in a chain going back to the apostles themselves. The timing of the establishment of the canon seriously complicates the Protestant view of Scripture alone. Logically, the doctrine of sola scriptura, Scripture alone, depends on having a defined, agreed-upon canon of Scripture. However, the canon was not definitively defined until the 16th century Council of Trent in 1546, well after the start of the Protestant Revolt. The Protestant reformers reject the authority of the Catholic Church, but they inherited the canon that the Catholic Church defined. This is incoherent and undermines the historical integrity of the Protestant position. The canon is the product of Catholic tradition and magisterium, not something that descended from the apostles whole and intact. If the Catholic Church possessed authority to define the canon, then that authority does not disappear when sola scriptura is proclaimed. The canon depends on the Church's authority, so that authority cannot simply be nullified by Scripture alone. This is a foundational flaw. Calling for Scripture alone while altering the canon and interpreting Scripture subjectively is incoherent. The Catholic argument for an infallible church authority to determine both canon and doctrinal interpretation avoids these logical contradictions and unstable uncertainties. This article is available on the Coffee page linked in the description. If you like this concise content by Lloyd de Jong, please subscribe on Coffee for more and support more of this work there. Here on YouTube, please like the content with a thumbs up, share it and subscribe to the channel.